The steel hull of USS Archerfish trembled around me as I pressed my ear against the sonar headset, listening to the rhythmic thrum of massive screws cutting through the black Pacific waters above. It was November 28, 1944, and somewhere in the darkness ahead of us lurked the largest warship ever built by human hands. My name is Commander Joseph Enright, and I was about to write my name in the annals of naval history with 6 Mark 14 torpedoes and a crew of 80 brave souls. The sound was unmistakable, 4 massive propellers churning water with the deep, resonant beat of a giant's heartbeat. I had been hunting submarines and surface vessels for 2 years in these waters, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. Intelligence had whispered rumors of a secret Japanese supercarrier, something beyond imagination. But the reality of tracking her was like stalking a moving mountain beneath the waves. Captain, sonar contact bearing 020, range approximately 12,000 yards, Seaman First Class Paul Watanabe whispered, his voice tight with concentration. Despite his Japanese surname, Paul was as American as apple pie. Born and raised in California before the war scattered his family to internment camps while he served his country beneath the waves. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Here was a young man of Japanese heritage helping us hunt the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. I adjusted my position at the periscope, feeling the familiar weight of command settle across my shoulders like a lead blanket. The submarine service was a different kind of warfare. No screaming dive bombers or thundering battleship guns. Just the whisper of water against steel, the soft ping of sonar, and the crushing weight of 300 feet of Pacific Ocean pressing down on our hull. Every decision could mean the difference between victory and becoming another ghost ship on the ocean floor. All stop, I ordered quietly, my voice carrying through the cramped control room. Rig for silent running. The order passed through the boat like a whispered prayer. Within seconds, every unnecessary piece of equipment fell silent. The air conditioning stopped its gentle hum, the ventilation fans ceased their rotation, and even the coffee pot in the galley was switched off. 80 men held their breath as USS Archerfish became a steel phantom, drifting through the darkness like a predator scenting prey. I had been patrolling these waters for 6 weeks, part of Operation Barney, a coordinated submarine offensive designed to strangle Japan's remaining supply lines. The war was turning in our favor. MacArthur was island hopping across the Pacific, and our B-29 superfortresses were beginning to rain death on the Japanese mainland. But Japan still had teeth, and somewhere in the darkness above us swam the most dangerous predator in their fleet. The target was designated Shinano, though we didn't know her name yet. Naval intelligence had picked up radio chatter about a massive new carrier being rushed to completion at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. The ship was so secret that even our codebreakers had struggled to piece together her specifications. What we knew was this: she was huge, she was fast, and she was heading somewhere important enough to risk moving her through submarine-infested waters. Sonar reports multiple contacts. Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Robert Johnson, my executive officer. Looks like she's got a full escort. I'm counting at least 3 destroyers, maybe 4. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. A heavily escorted target meant something valuable, and something valuable meant an opportunity to strike a blow that might shorten this war by months or even years. Every Japanese carrier we sent to the bottom meant fewer planes attacking our boys at Iwo Jima, fewer kamikaze attacks on our task forces, fewer American mothers receiving telegram notifications that their sons wouldn't be coming home. The mathematics of submarine warfare were brutally simple. We carried 24 torpedoes, each one a Mark 14 with a 643-pound warhead. Against a target this size, I would need to fire a spread, multiple torpedoes aimed at different points along her hull to maximize the chances of critical hits. Miss, and we'd revealed our position to those destroyers for nothing. Hit, and we might just change the course of the war. Bearing drift indicates target is on a steady course, Paul whispered from the sonar station. Speed approximately 20 knots, Zigzagging pattern suggests she's aware of submarine threat. Of course she was zigzagging. Every Japanese captain worth his salt knew these waters were crawling with American submarines. Since the beginning of 1944, we had been systematically dismantling their merchant marine and picking off their warships one by one. The Japanese called it the American submarine menace, and they weren't wrong. We were a menace, and proud of it. I moved to the plotting table, where Chief Quartermaster John Crosby was carefully tracking the target's movements with ruler and compass. The art of submarine attack required patience, mathematics, and a healthy dose of intuition. I needed to predict where the target would be when my torpedoes arrived, accounting for her speed, her zigzag pattern, and the time it would take our fish to swim through the water. "Chief, what's your solution?" I asked quietly. Crosby looked up from his calculations, his weathered face grim in the red light of the control room. "Based on current course and speed, I recommend firing at a range of 1,500 yards, torpedo run time approximately 90 seconds. If we can get into position on her port quarter, we'll have a clear shot at her machinery spaces. 1,500 yards. Close enough to count the rivets on her hull. Close enough that if those destroyers detected us, we'd be fighting for our lives in the crushing depths of the Pacific. But close enough to ensure our torpedoes would find their mark. Set torpedo room for spread firing," I ordered. "I want tubes 1 through 6 loaded and ready. We'll fire at intervals of 3 seconds, spread pattern to cover her length." The order passed through the boat, and I could feel the tension ratchet up another notch. In the forward torpedo room, Chief Torpedoman Mike O'Brien and his crew were preparing 2,400 pounds of high explosive for launch. Each torpedo was a precision instrument of destruction, 11 feet of steel and TNT designed for one purpose: to punch holes in enemy ships and send them to the bottom. "Captain, I'm getting a better picture of the contact," Paul reported, his voice barely audible. "The sound signature is unlike anything I've heard before. This isn't just a carrier, she's massive. The screw noise suggests displacement well over 60,000 tons. 60,000 tons. The largest American carriers were around 30,000 tons, and here we were stalking something twice that size. If intelligence was correct, this was Shinano, converted from a Yamato-class battleship hull into the largest aircraft carrier ever built. She was supposed to be Japan's answer to American naval aviation dominance, a floating fortress capable of carrying over 100 aircraft. I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction. If we could sink her, we'd be removing a significant threat from the Pacific theater. More importantly, we'd be proving that American submarines could reach out and touch Japan's most precious naval assets, even in their home waters. "Up periscope," I ordered softly. The periscope slid upward with a barely audible hiss, and I pressed my eye to the eyepiece. The surface was a study in contrast, brilliant moonlight reflecting off the wave tops, creating a silver pathway across the dark water. It was what submariners called a hunter's moon, bright enough to see surface contacts, but dark enough to hide a submarine's wake. And there she was. Even at a distance of 8,000 yards, Shinano was unmistakable. Her silhouette rose from the water like a steel mountain, her flight deck stretching nearly 900 feet from bow to stern. She was magnificent and terrifying, a testament to Japanese engineering and shipbuilding prowess. Her escorts moved around her in a protective screen, their destroyers cutting white wakes as they zigged and zagged through moonlit waters. "She's beautiful," I whispered, then caught myself. Beautiful, yes, but also deadly. Every airplane on that flight deck represented a threat to American lives. Every bomb and torpedo in her magazines could be used against our forces advancing across the Pacific. Beauty had no place in war, only victory and defeat. "Down periscope." "Chief, bring us to periscope depth and prepare for approach." The next hour was a careful dance of hunter and prey. Shinano continued her erratic zigzag pattern, her escorts maintaining their protective screen while we maneuvered into attack position. I surfaced the periscope every few minutes, taking quick bearings and ranges while avoiding detection by the destroyer crews who were undoubtedly scanning the waters for the telltale feather of a submarine periscope. The tension in the control room was palpable. Every man knew we were attempting something unprecedented, a lone submarine stalking the largest warship ever built. If we succeeded, it would be the most significant submarine victory of the war. If we failed, we might not live to see another sunrise. Sonar contact bearing 015, range 4,000 yards, Paul reported. Target appears to be settling on a steady course. I raised the periscope again, studying the massive carrier through the crosshairs of the attack periscope. At 4,000 yards, I could make out individual details, the superstructure rising from the starboard side of the flight deck, the massive elevator platforms, the bristling forest of anti-aircraft guns. She was a fortress, but every fortress had weaknesses. Range to target 3,500 yards, I announced. Bearing steady. Chief, this is it. Stand by for final approach. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my naval career. We closed to within 12,000 yards, then 1,500, then finally to the optimal firing range of 1,200 yards. Shinano loomed above us like a moving island, her massive hull displacing water that we could feel through our own hull as pressure waves. All tubes ready, Captain, reported O'Brien from the torpedo room. I took one final look through the periscope, calculating angles, distances, and timing. The carrier was making approximately 18 knots on a steady course, her escorts spread out in a protective screen. If I fired now, the torpedoes would intercept her amidships, right at the waterline where they would do maximum damage. Fire one, I commanded. The submarine shuddered as the first torpedo launched, compressed air blowing it from the tube with a sound like a giant's cough. I counted 3 seconds, visualizing the torpedo's path through the water toward the unsuspecting carrier. Fire two. Another shudder, another torpedo racing through the darkness toward its target. I continued the sequence, launching all 6 torpedoes in rapid succession, each one aimed at a different section of the carrier's hull. It was like throwing a handful of deadly spears at a giant. If even one found its mark, the result could be catastrophic. All torpedoes running hot, straight, and normal, reported Chief O'Brien. Estimate torpedo runtime 90 seconds. 90 seconds. An eternity in submarine warfare. I kept the periscope up, watching the carrier's silhouette for any sign that we had been detected. The destroyers continued their patrol patterns, their sonar operators scanning the waters for threats. If they had heard our torpedo launches, they gave no sign. 60 seconds to impact, Johnson announced quietly. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. 6 torpedoes, each carrying enough explosive to punch through the strongest armor, racing through the water at 46 knots toward the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. If they missed, we would have revealed our position for nothing. If they hit, we would have achieved something that would echo through naval history. 30 seconds to impact. Through the periscope, I could see Shinano continuing her steady course, unaware of the death racing toward her through the black water. Her flight deck was illuminated by moonlight, and I could make out the shapes of aircraft secured to the deck. Somewhere in that massive hull were over 2,000 Japanese sailors, men who had families and dreams, just like our own crew. But war makes killers of us all. 10 seconds to impact. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense with anticipation. Around me, the control room was silent except for the soft hum of electrical equipment and the distant sound of water against our hull. 80 men waited for the results of 2 years of training, months of patrol, and 1 moment of perfect calculation. Then it happened. The first explosion was like distant thunder, a deep rumble that traveled through the water and shook our hull. Then the second, closer and more powerful. The third hit with the force of an underwater earthquake, and through the periscope, I could see a massive column of water and debris erupting from the carrier's starboard side. Hit! 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 I shouted, unable to contain my excitement. 3 definite hits amidships. The 4th torpedo missed, but the 5th struck near the stern with a detonation that lit up the night sky. The 6th torpedo, our final shot, exploded against the carrier's hull just forward of the bridge, sending a towering column of fire and smoke into the air. 4 hits out of 6 torpedoes. It was the kind of shooting that submarine commanders dreamed about. Through the periscope, I watched in fascination and horror as the mighty Shinano began to list to starboard. The massive carrier, pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, was mortally wounded. Her escorts were racing toward us now, their searchlights sweeping the water as they tried to locate the submarine that had just dealt them such a devastating blow. "Take her down." "Emergency dive," I ordered. "All ahead flank." The submarine tilted downward as we flooded the ballast tanks and dove toward the safety of the depths. Behind us, the destroyer's screws grew louder as they raced to the scene of the attack, their sonar pinging frantically as they searched for us in the darkness. "Passing 100 feet, Johnson reported. Destroyer screws bearing 020, closing fast." I could hear them through the hull now, the high-pitched whine of destroyers running at flank speed, their propellers cavitating as they churned the water into foam. They would drop depth charges soon, trying to crush us with underwater explosions, but we had a head start and the advantage of knowing exactly where we were going. "Level off at 300 feet, I ordered. "Slow to 1/3 speed. We'll let them chase their own shadows while we slip away." For the next 2 hours, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the Japanese destroyers. They dropped dozens of depth charges, each one a thunderous explosion that shook our hull and rattled our teeth. But we were ghosts in the water, invisible to their sonar and too deep for their charges to reach us effectively. As we crept away from the scene of the attack, I couldn't resist one final look through the periscope. Shinano was still visible on the horizon, her massive hull now clearly listing to starboard. Fires burned along her flight deck, and I could see her escorts clustered around her like worried children around a dying parent. She was doomed. I had seen enough torpedoed ships to recognize the signs. The list was increasing, and no amount of damage control could save her now. Somewhere in the darkness of the Pacific, 2,400 pounds of American-made explosives had punched holes in her hull that would send her to the bottom within hours. "Secure from general quarters," I announced over the intercom. "Well done, men. We've just sunk the largest warship in the Japanese Navy." The cheer that went up from the crew was audible throughout the boat. These were men who had trained for years for this moment, who had risked their lives in the dangerous waters of the Pacific for the chance to strike a blow against the enemy. They had earned their moment of celebration. But even as we celebrated, I felt the weight of what we had accomplished. Shinano was more than just a ship. She was a symbol of Japanese naval power, a testament to their engineering prowess and their determination to continue fighting. Her loss would be felt throughout the Japanese fleet, a reminder that nowhere was safe from American submarines. Over the next several hours, we monitored Japanese radio traffic as rescue ships converged on the scene. The reports were fragmentary and coded, but the picture they painted was clear. Shinano was sinking, and there was nothing the Japanese could do to save her. At 10:17 hours on November 29, 1944, the radio traffic stopped. Shinano, the largest aircraft carrier ever built, had slipped beneath the waves of the Pacific Ocean, taking with her over 1,000 Japanese sailors and the hopes of a nation already facing defeat. As USS Archerfish set course for Guam and our home base, I stood in the control room reflecting on what we had accomplished. In the span of 6 minutes, we had fired 6 torpedoes and changed the course of naval history. The largest warship ever built by human hands had been sunk by a single submarine with a crew of 80 men. But victory came at a price. Those 1,000 Japanese sailors who went down with their ship were sons, fathers, and brothers, just like the men under my command. They had fought bravely and died for their country, and their sacrifice deserved recognition even from their enemies. War is a terrible thing, but sometimes it is necessary. The attack on Pearl Harbor had brought America into this conflict, and we would not rest until the forces of militarism and aggression were defeated. Every ship we sank, every aircraft we destroyed, every enemy installation we bombarded brought us one step closer to the peace that millions of people around the world desperately craved. The sinking of Shinano was more than just a tactical victory. It was a strategic blow that would resonate throughout the Japanese fleet. The loss of their largest carrier meant fewer aircraft to oppose our advancing forces, fewer trained pilots to man their remaining planes, and fewer resources to continue their resistance. But perhaps most importantly, it was a message. American submarines could reach out and touch Japan's most precious naval assets, even in their home waters. No ship was too large, no escort too strong, no target too well protected. We were the hunters, and the vast Pacific Ocean was our hunting ground. As we sailed toward home, I thought about the men who had made this victory possible. Chief Quartermaster Crosby, whose calculations had put us in the perfect position for the attack. Seaman Watanabe, whose sharp ears had first detected the massive carrier. Chief O'Brien, whose torpedoes had found their mark with deadly precision. And all the other men who had worked together as a team to achieve something that would be remembered long after the war ended. The Pacific Theater was a vast canvas painted with the blood and sacrifice of millions of men from dozens of nations. But on this November night in 1944, a small piece of that canvas belonged to USS Archerfish and her crew of 80 brave souls who had stalked and sunk the largest warship ever built. Shinano now rests on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, a steel monument to the futility of war and the courage of the men who fight it. Her story is a reminder that in war, as in life, size and power mean nothing without the skill, determination, and courage to use them effectively. The war would continue for another 9 months, but the sinking of Shinano marked a turning point in the Pacific campaign. American submarines had proven that they could strike at the heart of Japanese naval power, and the enemy's ability to project force across the Pacific was severely compromised. As I write these words more than 70 years later, I can still feel the deck of USS Archerfish beneath my feet, still hear the sound of those massive screws cutting through the water above us, still see the brilliant flash of our torpedoes finding their target. It was a moment that changed the course of history, a reminder that sometimes the fate of nations can turn on the actions of a small group of determined men willing to risk everything for their country and their cause. The Pacific Ocean is vast and deep, and somewhere in its depths lies the remains of the mightiest warship ever built. She is a monument to Japanese engineering and American determination, a reminder that in the end, warfare won not by the largest ships or the most powerful guns, but by the courage and skill of the men who fight them. Shinano's brief career lasted only 10 days from her commissioning to her sinking, but her legacy lives on as a testament to the decisive power of submarine warfare and the determination of free nations to resist tyranny wherever it may be found. She was the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine, and her destruction marked the beginning of the end for Japanese naval power in the Pacific. The war would end the following year with Japan's unconditional surrender, but the lessons learned in the depths of the Pacific Ocean would echo through naval history for generations to come. Sometimes, the smallest hunter can bring down the largest prey, and courage combined with skill can overcome any obstacle. That is the story of USS Archerfish and the sinking of Shinano, a tale of hunters and prey, of courage and determination, and of the men who fought beneath the waves to secure victory and peace for future generations. It is a story that deserves to be remembered, not just for the tactical brilliance of the attack, but for the sacrifice and courage of all who served in the silent service during those dark days when the fate of the world hung in the balance. The Pacific Ocean keeps its secrets well, but on November 29, 1944, it witnessed one of the most remarkable achievements in naval history. USS Archerfish, a single submarine with a crew of 80 men, had stalked and sunk the largest warship ever built proving once and for all that in the deadly game of underwater warfare, skill and courage matter more than size and power. That night, as we sailed toward home through the dark waters of the Pacific, I knew that we had participated in something extraordinary. We had changed the course of history with 6 torpedoes and 90 seconds of perfect shooting. It was a moment that would define our lives and echo through the ages, a reminder that sometimes the actions of a few can alter the fate of many. The sinking of Shinano was more than just a naval victory. It was a symbol of American determination and the triumph of democratic values over militarism and aggression. It was a message to the world that freedom would not be defeated, that tyranny would not prevail, and that the sacrifices of those who fought for liberty will not be forgotten. As the sun rose over the Pacific on November 30th, 1944, USS Archerfish continued her journey home, her crew forever marked by their participation in one of the most remarkable achievements in naval history. We had hunted and killed the largest predator in the Japanese fleet, and in doing so, we had helped secure the victory that would bring peace to a war-torn world. The story of Shinano and her brief, tragic career serves as a reminder that in war, as in life, the only constant is change. The largest ship can be sunk by the smallest submarine, the mightiest fleet can be defeated by determined enemies, and the fate of nations can turn on the actions of a few brave souls willing to risk everything for their beliefs. That is the legacy of USS Archerfish and her crew, and that is the story of the night we sunk the largest warship ever built. It is a story of courage, skill, and determination, a reminder that freedom is never free, and that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Most importantly, it is a story of the men who served beneath the waves, fighting a silent war in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, where victory meant survival and defeat meant death in the crushing darkness of the deep. The Pacific Ocean remembers everything, and somewhere in its depths lies the remains of Shinano, a steel monument to the courage of those who fought and died in the greatest conflict in human history. She is a reminder that wars are won not by the largest ships or the most powerful weapons, but by the courage and determination of the men who fight them. And on November 29, 1944, that courage belonged to the crew of USS Archerfish, the submarine that sunk the largest warship ever built.